saw one view earlier around growing the economy, around trying to get more income to the pockets of more people, particularly as the cost of living is going up so dramatically at the moment. Annabel Bishop is the chief economist at Investec. Annabel, good afternoon to you. If you look at inflation around the world, I mean, the United States has had the highest inflation in so many years. In Britain, they talk about the highest and the most dramatic increase in the cost of living in living memory. Your memory is probably better than mine. Are we going to have the highest inflation in living memory in South Africa too?
Yes, hi, Stephen. Look, I did see one very interesting statistic, and that's the Eurozone has reached producer price inflation of about 38%. Now, if you compare that to South Africa, we're sitting with our producer price inflation, around about 12-13%. So, we're not quite as bad as some countries. Our CPI inflation rate at 5.9% is not at, the United States, which is above 8%. And in fact, I recall we've actually had inflation, CPI inflation in South Africa in double digits. And of course, PPI inflation going closer to 20%. And that's been on very bad droughts, but of course, a number of other factors as well. So what we're really finding this time around, Stephen, is that South Africa's inflation is actually quite well contained compared to others globally, but much is going to depend on what happens with fuel and energy costs and, of course, food prices as well from here.
I mean, I suppose it all really, the big variable, there's several big variables, but the big variable probably still is Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the impact on oil prices, and then following that, what happens in China.
Absolutely. I read today that OPEC Plus has, led by Saudi Arabia, has said it's going to increase production over July and August, but that's really just pulling it forwards from September. And of course, they made that announcement last week. But I think concerns are that it's still not going to be enough. And, that's really the sense we're getting today now. So oil prices are back at $120 a barrel. Of course, that's for Brent crude. That's what matters for South Africa, for our fuel prices. In fact, we actually import mainly petroleum product prices because, of course, we don't refine too much anymore in South Africa. But, having a look at the big price drivers, as you mentioned, food, fuel prices, we obviously have seen a big impact coming through from the Russian-Ukraine conflict. Of course, now the big issue is how does Ukraine send out its harvest? How does it send out its wheat harvest around the world? And of course, for South Africa, we do grow some wheat, but not enough. We'll probably have to import about 50% at least. And of course, the problems are with the blockades in the Black Sea. And the reality of the situation is it's likely going to mean higher bread prices as we move through the winter months and, of course, out to the end of this year as well. So we have in the past seen that retailers in South Africa have absorbed prices where they could for necessities such as staples. That obviously includes not your luxury type baked wheaten products, but, your basic type of bread products. And those that will probably see a lot of that again. Government themselves have said they can't continue to deliver a cut in the fuel levy of R1.50 as they have been doing for 3 months now, and of course they're going to carry on for the next month as well. So there are some concerns around these very, very high sticky prices. The European Central Bank has said they've noticed that price pressures are broadening, and that's a worry that these high inflation rates start to become embedded.
There's a lot going on. In the past, we've seen governments intervene, where it can to try and help really poor people and people who really have no money. So you've got, for example, the social relief of distress grant of R350 a month, nowhere near enough, but better than nothing. At the same time now, we have a middle class that's coming under strain because that's how much the cost of living has risen. I make this point because the money for the social grant comes from the middle class to an extent. I realize it's also commodities, platinum, etc., and other areas, but it comes to an extent from the middle class. Is government now, strangely, going to be under pressure to help the middle class as well?
Well, just the first part of your question, where you were talking about governments around the world. What we saw in the UK is that they're looking to raise £15 billion, which is not an insignificant amount of money, from super taxes on energy producers, that's your oil, your gas producers, and of course using that money to alleviate the pressure on those in need from an income perspective, not necessarily just low-income earners, but of course, high-income earners as well. In South Africa, yes, we do have the social relief grant. Look, the vast majority of our individuals in South Africa are in the low income bracket. Of course, corporate tax also a big income earner as well for the large corporates. I think what we're going to have to see here in South Africa is the reality of the situation that we might have to see more support coming through to keep the fuel price from shooting up substantially further. The government can't afford to persist with the R1.50 fuel price levy cut. We're going to have to see cuts in other areas, whether it's at the retail margin, etc., because, of course, our low-income earners rely very heavily on transport, to get where they need to go. Food costs as well, of course, very high. We've had a commission looking at the fruit and vegetable products, but unfortunately, there's also been other conditions as well. Poor weather conditions around the world, and South Africa's food prices are priced on international prevailing traded prices. So the reality of the situation does not look like this high inflationary pressure, this real squeeze we're seeing on necessities. Of course, fuel and food is likely to go away in the near term, and government's going to have to think a lot more about it.
Annabel Bishop, thank you very much indeed, Chief Economist at Investec Bank.